What in the hell do you think you're doing with that piece of junk? The voice, sharp and laced with the unearned confidence of a new commission, sliced through the quiet hum of the electronics repair bay. Old Samuel Callahan didn't flinch. His hands, gnarled and scarred by a lifetime of work both delicate and brutal, continued their patient dance with a fine-tipped soldering iron. A wisp of silver smoke curled up from the circuit board of a radio that was older than the speaker's parents. The air smelled of ozone and hot metal, a scent Samuel found more comforting than any cologne. He finished the connection, his movements economical and precise, before slowly setting the iron in its cradle. Only then did he turn his head, his pale blue eyes, clouded with age but still sharp, landing on the polished boots of Second Lieutenant Marcus Davies. The lieutenant stood with his hands on his hips, his uniform starched to a razor's edge, a stark contrast to Samuel's simple gray work shirt and worn denim trousers. "I'm repairing it, son," Samuel said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to come from deep within the earth. Lieutenant Davies let out a short, incredulous laugh. The two young airmen at the next bench, both barely out of their teens, stopped their work on a modern satellite transceiver and watched, their faces carefully blank. They knew this lieutenant. He'd been assigned as the new officer in charge of the communications wing a month ago and had spent every day since trying to prove he was the smartest person in any room he entered. Repairing it? That thing belongs in a museum, or more likely, a scrap heap. We are running a state-of-the-art facility here, not a retirement home for antique electronics. I have a deadline for getting 3 tactical comms suites back online, and you're wasting bench space and power on this relic. Samuel looked back at the radio. It was a Collins KWM-2, a classic high-frequency transceiver that had been the workhorse of military communications for decades. Its forest green case was scuffed and dented, each mark a silent testament to a story Davies would never comprehend. "This relic," Samuel said softly, his fingers tracing a deep scratch near the frequency dial, "has saved more lives than any piece of equipment in this room. It deserves a little respect." "Respect?" Davies scoffed, stepping closer. He leaned over the workbench, invading Samuel's space, his voice dropping to a condescending sneer. "Listen, old-timer. I don't know who you are or what sweetheart deal allows a civilian contractor of your advanced age to tinker in my shop, but that ends today. I am the officer in charge here. My authority is absolute. When I say that piece of junk goes, it goes. Now, pack it up and get it out of my facility. Am I making myself clear?" The two young airmen shifted uncomfortably. They liked Samuel. The old man would come in 3 days a week, a quiet volunteer authorized by the base commander himself, to work on special projects. He never bothered anyone, and he often shared quiet wisdom or a clever trick for diagnosing a stubborn circuit board. They knew the lieutenant was crossing a line, but the silver bar on his collar held them in place. Samuel looked from the lieutenant's angry, youthful face to the radio, then back again. He picked up a small brush and gently swept away a bit of dust from a vacuum tube. "The base commander asked me to restore this unit personally, Lieutenant." Davies straightened up, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Did he now? Well, Colonel Peterson is a busy man. I'm sure he won't mind when I inform him that I've reprioritized his little pet project to meet critical mission objectives. In fact, I'm sure he'll commend me for my initiative." He turned to one of the junior airmen. "Airman Jones, find a box. Help Mr. whatever his name is, pack up his toys. I want this bench cleared in 5 minutes." Airman Jones hesitated, his eyes darting between the furious officer and the calm old man. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. He opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't find the words. The silence in the bay grew heavy, charged with a tension that felt thick enough to stop a clock. "That won't be necessary, Airman," Samuel said, his voice still even. He looked directly at Davies, his gaze unwavering. "I'll take care of it." His quiet defiance seemed to infuriate the lieutenant more than any outburst could have. Davies' face flushed a deep red, his jaw tightening. He was used to immediate, unquestioning obedience. This old man's placid refusal to be intimidated was a direct challenge to his fragile authority, an insult he couldn't tolerate. He opened his mouth to unleash a fresh torrent of verbal abuse, to assert his dominance once and for all, but the words caught in his throat. The main bay door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, flooding the room with the bright North Carolina sunlight and the authoritative presence of a visiting delegation. The world seemed to slow down. Lieutenant Davies, caught mid-bluster, snapped his head towards the door, his expression of rage quickly morphing into one of sycophantic panic. Striding into the communications bay was a figure who radiated command. He was tall and imposing, his uniform adorned with the 4 silver stars of a full general of the United States Marine Corps. He was flanked by the base commander, Colonel Peterson, and a small entourage of aides who moved with the quiet efficiency of professionals. Davies' back went rigid. He threw his shoulders back and executed a salute so sharp it was almost comical. "General Madsen, sir, welcome to the 78th Communications Wing Repair Facility. We weren't expecting you, sir." General Madsen, a man whose face was a roadmap of hard-won campaigns, barely glanced at the flustered lieutenant. His eyes, sharp and analytical, swept across the room, taking in the state-of-the-art equipment, the neat workbenches, the young airman who had also snapped to terrified attention. Then his gaze fell upon the far corner of the bay. It landed on the old man in the denim trousers and the vintage radio sitting before him. Everything stopped. The general's forward momentum ceased so abruptly that the colonel nearly bumped into him. The aides froze mid-stride. The air in the room became still and silent, save for the low hum of the ventilation system. The general's entire demeanor transformed. The hard, inspecting look on his face softened, replaced by something else entirely, a look of profound, unadulterated reverence. He took a deliberate step forward, then another, his polished shoes clicking softly on the concrete floor. He walked past the stunned Lieutenant Davies as if he were a piece of furniture. He walked past the gleaming racks of modern servers and encrypted transceivers. He walked directly to Samuel Callahan's workbench. Samuel had slowly risen to his feet, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at the 4-star general, and a small, weary smile touched his lips. He gave a slight, respectful nod. General Madsen did not return the nod. Instead, in the dead silent room, in front of the base commander, his own staff, and a shell-shocked second lieutenant, General Jonathan Madsen squared his shoulders, brought his right hand up in a flawless, textbook motion, and rendered the sharpest, most heartfelt salute of his decorated 40-year career. It wasn't the perfunctory salute one gives a subordinate or even a peer. It was a salute of deep, abiding respect, the kind a warrior gives to a legend. "Master Chief," the general said, his voice thick with emotion, holding the salute with unwavering precision. "It is an honor to see you again, sir." The word "sir" hung in the air, an atom bomb of cognitive dissonance that shattered Lieutenant Davies' world. He stared, his mouth slightly agape. The base commander, Colonel Peterson, looked from the general to Samuel, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. The young airmen looked like they had just seen a ghost. "Master Chief? Sir?" This was Samuel, the quiet old volunteer. What was happening? Samuel finally returned the gesture, not with a salute. He was a civilian now, but with that same quiet nod, this one carrying the weight of shared history. "General," he acknowledged. "Good to see you're still keeping yourself out of trouble, Johnny." The casual use of the general's first name was another shockwave. General Madsen actually chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that seemed utterly out of place just moments before. He dropped his salute and extended his hand, which Samuel took in his own rough grip. "I try, Sam. I try. But it's harder to do without my comms chief watching my 6-inch." He turned his head slightly, his eyes finally landing on the petrified Lieutenant Davies. The warmth vanished from his expression, replaced by a glacial cold. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Report." Davies stumbled forward, his mind struggling to process the inverted reality he now faced. "Sir? General, sir? I was just conducting a routine inspection of my workspace, ensuring mission readiness." "Is that what you call it?" the general asked, his gaze flicking to the Collins KWM-2 on the bench. "I call it a damn disgrace." He turned back to face Davies fully, his 6'3" frame seeming to tower over the young officer. "Do you have any idea who this man is, Lieutenant?" Davies could only shake his head, his face pale. "No, sir, I do not." "Of course you don't," Madsen bit out. "You see an old man. You see a civilian. You see someone you think you can push around to feel important. You didn't see the uniform he used to wear or the sacrifices he made in it. The general gestured towards Samuel. This is Master Chief Petty Officer Samuel Callahan. Retired. He spent 35 years in the United States Navy. The last 20 of those were with Naval Special Warfare Development Group. You might know them by a different name. SEAL Team 6, Incha Collective. Sharp intake of breath came from the young airman. Davies' eyes widened in horror. This wasn't just a veteran. This was a plank owner from the most elite unit on the planet. The general wasn't finished. His voice was now a lecture, sharp and clear, meant not just for Davies, but for everyone in the room. This man, this old-timer, wrote the book on unconventional warfare communications. Literally, the encryption algorithms your fancy new satellite gear uses, they are based on foundational principles he developed with a pencil and a slide rule in a Quonset hut in the middle of nowhere. He didn't just use the gear, Lieutenant. He invented it. He built it. In the field. Under fire. With nothing but spare parts and pure genius, he pointed a rigid finger at the vintage radio. And that piece of junk you were so eager to throw out? That is the actual KWM-2 transceiver Master Chief Callahan used during Operation Eagle Claw, the Iran hostage rescue mission. When the primary comms network on his helicopter went down after the sandstorm, he patched that radio into the aircraft's antenna array and re-established contact with the command element, coordinating the withdrawal under impossible conditions. The after-action report, which you should have damn well read as a communications officer, cites his actions as the sole reason the entire force wasn't captured or killed during that disaster. That radio is not junk. It is a holy relic of courage and innovation, and he is restoring it for permanent display at the National Cryptologic Museum. Every word landed on Lieutenant Davies like a physical blow. He swayed slightly, his face ashen. He looked at Samuel, truly looked at him for the first time. He didn't see a frail old man anymore. He saw the quiet, unbreakable strength in his posture. He saw the intelligence that still burned brightly in his pale blue eyes. He saw the scars on his hands not as signs of age, but as a record of a life lived in service to a cause greater than himself. The casual dismissal, the arrogance, the public humiliation, it all came crashing down on him, burying him in a landslide of shame. He had not just disrespected a volunteer, he had desecrated a living monument. Colonel Peterson, the base commander, finally stepped forward. "General, I take full responsibility. I authorized Mr. Callahan's work here. I should have briefed the lieutenant on his background." General Madsen held up a hand. "No, Colonel. This isn't on you. This is on him." He fixed his gaze back on Davies. "This is a failure of the most basic principles of leadership, observation and respect. You have eyes, but you do not see. You have a rank, but you have no authority, because authority is earned, not given. You just tried to throw a national hero out of your shop." The general paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the suffocating silence. "Master Chief Callahan could have ended your career with a single phone call. He knows more senators, secretaries, and generals than you've ever seen on television. But he didn't, because he has more class and dignity in his little finger than you have in your entire body. He stood there and took your abuse with a quiet grace that you clearly could not comprehend." The general stepped closer to Davies, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow more terrifying than his shouting. "Your career is not over, Lieutenant. Not yet. Because Master Chief Callahan is a better man than you are. And because I am going to give you a chance to learn the lesson you so desperately need. Your primary duty for the next 60 days, effective immediately, is no longer this shop. Your primary duty is him." He pointed at Samuel. "You will report to Master Chief Callahan every morning at 0800 hours. You will bring him his coffee, black, 2 sugars, I remember from Danam. You will be his assistant, his apprentice, his student. You will learn how to solder. You will learn the history of every piece of equipment he works on. You will listen to his stories. You will learn what it means to serve. And you will learn the goddamn meaning of the word respect. Maybe, just maybe, by the end of it, you'll be fit to lead. Are my orders clear, Lieutenant?" Davies could barely speak. A single, hot tear of shame traced a path down his cheek. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He looked past the general to the old man he had so cruelly belittled. "Yes, General," he whispered, his voice cracking. Then, finding a sliver of courage he didn't know he possessed, He took a step towards Samuel. He stood before the Master Chief, his body trembling slightly. He couldn't meet his eyes, staring instead at the tips of his own polished boots. "Master Chief." "Callahan, sir," he stammered. There are no words to express how sorry I am. My conduct was inexcusable. It was arrogant and disrespectful and wrong. I apologize, sir. I am profoundly sorry." Samuel watched him for a long moment. The anger and humiliation that had simmered in the room had evaporated, replaced by a heavy, teachable silence. He looked at this young, broken officer and saw not an enemy, but a kid who had made a terrible mistake. A kid who had been given too much authority before he had acquired the wisdom to wield it. Samuel reached out and placed a hand on the young lieutenant's shoulder. Davies flinched, as if expecting a blow, but the hand was surprisingly gentle. "We all make mistakes, son," Samuel said, his gravelly voice soft. "The important thing isn't the falling down. It's the getting back up. The learning." He gave the shoulder a slight squeeze. "The general says you're to bring me coffee tomorrow. 0800". He finally looked Davies in the eye. "Don't be late." A week later, the 78th Communications Wing repair facility was a different place. Lieutenant Davies still wore his uniform, but the arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. Each morning, he arrived at 0755 with a steaming cup of coffee, made exactly to Samuel's specifications. He would sit on a stool next to the Master Chief's workbench, and he would listen. He learned about vacuum tubes and crystal oscillators. He learned about bouncing signals off the ionosphere and the delicate art of antenna theory. But he learned about more than just electronics. He learned about a night mission in the Mekong Delta, where Samuel had to repair a radio while submerged up to his neck in a rice paddy, with enemy patrols just yards away. He learned about the cold of the Hindu Kush and the heat of the Somali desert. He learned about the friends Samuel had lost, the names and faces that haunted the quiet moments between stories. The Collins KWM-2 became their classroom. As Samuel's steady hands replaced brittle wiring and cleaned dusty contacts, he taught the lieutenant about the history etched into its metal case. This dent was from a piece of shrapnel in Grenada. That scratch came from being hastily dragged into a foxhole in Panama. The radio was not just a machine. It was a survivor, a silent witness to a lifetime of service. The young airman in the shop watched the transformation with quiet awe. The tension was gone, replaced by an atmosphere of profound respect. They started asking Samuel their own questions, and he would answer with patient wisdom. The shop became less of a workplace and more of a sanctuary, a place where the gap between generations was bridged by shared purpose and newfound understanding. One afternoon, as Samuel was showing Davies how to tune the transceiver's final amplifier, the lieutenant paused, his hands still. "Master Chief," he said, his voice quiet, "why didn't you say something? When I was being such a jackass. Why did you just take it?" Samuel finished tightening a screw before looking up. He looked at the young man, really looked at him, and saw the genuine confusion and regret in his eyes. "Because, son," he said, his voice calm and steady, "the loudest man in the room is often the weakest. I didn't need to tell you who I was. I already knew." He turned his attention back to the radio, a faint smile on his lips. "And I figured you'd find out soon enough." He powered on the transceiver. A soft orange glow emanated from the dial as the vacuum tubes warmed up. A faint hiss of static filled the quiet workshop, the sound of the world waiting to speak. For the first time, Lieutenant Davies understood it wasn't just noise. It was a language, and he was finally, truly, beginning to learn how to listen.